And initially, I didn't want to talk about it. I was a little embarrassed, to be honest. And then I had like the people who I love most maybe were a little nervous about me saying stuff about it because of, church historically is such a taboo topic. If
Yeah.
we're being honest, talking about mental illness in the church, usually you're demon possessed, or you're not praying hard enough, you're not praying enough, or maybe it's a spiritual issue more than it is a cognitive or mental illness. And so I never really heard anybody from the platform name my pain. And
Yeah.
so I knew that because I grew up in trauma and because I grew up in dysfunction, I could look at that and say that's somebody else's fault, right?
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Stress Test, the heartbeat of a healthy leader. We've got an amazing guest with us. Each and every episode is amazing, getting to some great leaders. But today, Pastor Brittany Jones is our guest, and we love Pastor Brittany and Travis. They pastor Motivation Church right here in Richmond, Virginia. They're not only in our hometown, but they actually were planted 6 years ago. They celebrate their 6-year anniversary this year out of Cornerstone Church, a church that we planted. That makes them our grandchild church, which we always have lots of fun about. But we have lots of fun with Travis and Brittany every time we're together, so Brittany's going to be great.
Yeah, they are full of wisdom and passion. They are amazing leaders. They have 2 daughters, and Brittany she's remarkable. I love it every time she speaks. She's a highly sought-after speaker across the nation. She's a writer. She speaks about mental health. She's a mental health advocate. She speaks from experience, and her personal story is riveting and inspiring. It's a story of restoration and grace, and you're going to love Brittany. We cannot wait. We've been waiting months to have her on the show. So we're so excited to introduce you to Brittany Jones.
Brittany, welcome to Stress Test.
I'm so excited to be here. This is amazing. I love y'all.
Too. We love talking to you anytime. So this is a nice formal way to do it, I guess.
We're just going to take
official,
one of our
not formal.
Yeah,
right,
we're going to take one of our unofficial raw conversations and get a chance for some people to listen in. We've loved learning from you and love connecting with you and Travis. So tell everyone a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your story.
Yeah.
And we'll dive in. I can't wait.
Yeah. Well, a little bit about me before we get super deep into my story. I have 2 beautiful girls, Jalen and Jada. Jalen just turned 13 a couple days ago. And I know it's like a weird phase that I'm going through. Like, I'm old enough to have a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
It's strange, but it's cool. And she's super sweet. And then Jada, who is 9. We have a golden doodle who is massive. Travis and I literally, like, we got this golden doodle that was super tiny, and we thought he was going to be small, and now he's 60 pounds and is laying on us like a baby. And then Travis and I will be married we're almost 14 years. We married 14 years in July. And it has been an incredible journey. We've been in ministry since the beginning of our marriage. And God has just been super faithful to us. We have been dating since we were in high school. And so we are high school sweethearts. It's been a journey. It's been fun. And through the midst of that, prior to Travis and I getting married, I grew up with a mom who struggled a little bit growing up. I was in a single parent home. My father passed away when I was 4 years old. Kind of grew up in some dysfunction. I have 4 other siblings, and they're pretty incredible people too. But it's been a journey. It's been ups and downs. I grew up in a lot of abuse, a lot of craziness in my childhood, and it's amazing to see what God has done. I'm 37 years old now, and when I was a little girl, I gave my heart to Jesus when I was 10, and I just can't imagine the life that God has given me. I'm looking back, I'm 37 and 20 some years ago, giving my heart to Jesus in the life that I'm living now. It's just pretty amazing. So I'm thankful. That is kind of me in a nutshell, but But the reason we're having this conversation today is because I walked through a season, and walking through a season of mental illness. I'm still in the midst of it, and God is still doing some pretty beautiful things in that even now. And so I'm a testament to somebody that can't say, hey, I've been through it and now look at me, I'm walking through it. And so it's kind of cool to be able to stand in the midst of it and still give God glory. So
wow, it's just been amazing to watch your journey. And you guys not only pastor an amazing church in Richmond, Motivation Church, but you speak all over the country, Brittany, on this issue, which I'm sure is very difficult in itself. But tell us a little bit about that process and kind of what you share and why. Why do you? Because you're opening yourself up every single time you do it.
Yeah, it initially, honestly, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder several years ago, and initially I didn't want to talk about it. I was a little embarrassed, to be honest. And then I had, like, the people who I love most maybe were a little nervous about me saying stuff about it because of, church historically is such a taboo topic. If we're being honest, talking about mental illness in the church, usually you're demon possessed, or you're not praying hard enough, you're not praying enough, or maybe it's a spiritual issue more than it is a cognitive or mental illness. And so I never really heard anybody from the platform name my pain. And so I knew that because I grew up in trauma and because I grew up in dysfunction, I could look at that and say, that's somebody else's fault, right?
Right.
Like, that person hurt me. So I knew, as a child of abuse and a child that walked through abuse, I knew that somebody else did something against me. So I could blame that person. I could point fingers at that person. And even though I walked through a season of shame, even with my trauma, and I pointed fingers at myself, I still knew that the trauma that I walked through was not my fault. But when it came to mental illness, I'm trying to figure out, who can I blame for this, right? Like, who do you point fingers at when it comes to my brain? And so you have to grapple with that for a little bit, and then recognize that, like, sometimes people walk through life, and I'm sure there's people in churches. I mean, if you think about it, if you look on any website like NAMI, you can see that 1 in 5 people in the United States struggle with mental illness. 1 in 6 US teenagers from age 6, or not teenagers, kids 6 through 17 struggle with mental illness. So people that you're sitting next to in your churches, in the pews, are struggling with this illness. But when we walk in our churches, we don't really talk about it much. And so I never thought that I'm going to pick up a mantle on my own. I just kept quiet, right? Like, so I was quiet about it. I was diagnosed with it, and I didn't want to just grab a diagnosis because a doctor said that I had a diagnosis. I walked through some heavy stuff in that season where I knew something was wrong. And so my mentor encouraged me to go to counseling. And when I went to counseling for a whole year before my therapist looked at me and said, you've got to go to a psychiatrist. There's something more going on. And so I went, and even that took a process before the diagnosis eventually came. And so as I'm going through this process, and I'm struggling in the highs and the lows, I realized, man, like, I could hide behind closed doors and be quiet like everybody else and be ashamed of my pain. Or I could boldly step forth and say, man, I'm struggling, but I'm not going to stay stuck. I'm not going to stay here. And I knew, when Travis and I were getting ready to plant Motivation Church, I had this thing on me, like, man, I'm going to do this. I have to do it without having to hide, because it's going to eventually be exposed. I mean, there are going to be days where I don't feel like showing up. There's going to be days I'm going to walk in this church and I don't want to put a smile on my face. And I could guarantee you there's other people that feel the exact same way. And so for me, I felt encouraged, like, I just have to do it different. And not because I'm like, oh man, I'm going to be the pastor's wife that come in and I'm just going to have tattoos all over and I'm going to be different. It wasn't that. There's no, like, arrogance about it. It was literally, I just have to do it different or it's going to kill me. Literally.
Absolutely.
Because the weight you feel because of the illness already feels like you're sinking. I felt like I was in a dark hole and I could not get myself out. Like, you're drowning, but you can't swim your way up. So if I felt that way without the pressure of trying to pretend with people, imagine feeling that way when you got to pretend.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Yeah. With an issue like that, I feel like people always considered it sinful. Like, if anybody behaved outside of the norm, it got some pretty nasty labels. So what do you notice when you share your story? in churches and through news articles and all of the various methods of communication, not just your people who love you, but people who don't even know you that you don't speak to.
I'll tell you this, like, you would be surprised. At one point I was afraid that people would be like super judgmental.
Yeah.
And there's just like a handful of people that don't get it. But the majority of the people are hungry for somebody to be honest. The church is ready for conversations like this, and we get a bad rep. We get a bad rep because it's almost assumed that we're going to neglect hard conversations, but people are ready for it. It's less, I mean, I probably get a literal handful of people. I walk in churches and I share very openly. You guys have heard my story in churches. Very rarely do I get people that say mean things to me. When I first started talking about it, you know, people didn't understand, right? So people would like ask questions, and I would get like random comments about like, you know, don't tell people this, as if people were uncertain if I was trying to tell people to go the therapy medication route versus the Jesus route. And I'm like, no, it's both. Like you could do
it's
Jesus
the same route
and therapy. Like Jesus wants us to do both, right? And so it's rare. I think what a great opportunity as the church to like have this conversation. It's beautiful. And so it's rare that I get people that are not kind to me. It's a handful, and those handful of people is so overwhelming how many people are encouraging to me. So I just kind of like, I hear people out, but then I also don't let that be the loudest voice in my ear, because I know the call that God has. But I also have to remind myself that this may be temporary, that I'm doing what I'm doing. Like this cannot be my kingdom that I'm standing on. Like I get an opportunity to be a voice for people that don't speak up about mental illness. And this is also not my kingdom. This is also not my end all be all. For right now in this season, I'm getting to do this, and it's incredible and I love it. And then it may not be the thing I do for the rest of my life, because maybe I'll be doing something different, but this is amazing right now. And so people are pretty kind.
Yeah. That's one of the things we love about you, is not only are you honest and vulnerable and willing to talk about pain, but you're not, like you said, you're not building a kingdom. You're not trying to what's the word I'm looking for?
Leverage what you're.
Yeah, you're not trying to build some superstructure, a platform that you become the voice for America and everybody needs to buy your merchandise. And you know what I'm saying? Like there's not it's a spiritual act of obedience rather than a commercial end game to something that you're trying to do. And I think that speaks across audiences, not just to people who have mental illness, which of course it's inspirational and gives hope. But I know with our own people, with every audience I think I've ever been in, when I've heard your story multiple times now, as a listener, that everybody is inspired, because we're able to look at you and say, well, if she can do that, given what she has to go through, then I can follow God with the cross that he's asked me to bear. We all have something. And that's what I love about your willingness to share.
It's really good. I mean, that's honestly what I hope people are encouraged, because I don't know everything. I'm still learning. I really am. And I believe that like we all have to be at that point where we just are willing to keep learning and growing. I have not arrived yet. I don't think I ever will. I think I'm in a season right now where I'm constantly learning something new about this illness and what I have to grow in, and the areas I grow in. And, you know, you guys talk about stress a lot, and I'm learning the things that are stressors for me and are triggers for me, and people that I'm around that are triggers for me, especially in ministry. Those are some of the greatest triggers. You're serving people constantly. God has called you to serve people, and people hurt people. So how do I manage my own mental health while God has called me to love people? And I think part of that is just knowing where you need to take a step back, and knowing when you need to pause for a minute, and not having to have all the answers. Saying you're sorry sometimes when you say things out of pocket. Like, you know, I'm just in a season where I just don't have to say all the right things and do all of the right things and have all the right words just because I have a platform.
It's just so good. That's so good.
I was just going to say, what kind of signs showed you that something was wrong, something was off, like something was different than the average stress?
Yeah, we talk about it this way, Brittany, like stress is an ally. It's actually given to us to give us a to signal you.
To
Right.
signal something's
Well,
off.
something on your dashboard is flashing what's going on. What were some of those flashing things that were happening for people who are like, man, I can relate to that. I'm walking through that right now. That's exactly how I feel.
Right. I mean, it's similar to just feelings. Like feelings are signals, and people ignore feelings, or they try to stuff feelings, because when we have those uncomfortable feelings, we try to like bury them, especially if you've had some uncomfortable moments in life, or things that have happened to you in your childhood, whatever. The easiest thing for somebody like me who grew up, maybe in poverty, or grew up with rough childhoods, and you didn't get what you needed, you are so used to burying things because you don't know if someone's going to take care of your needs. And
Mhm.
so here I am in my 20s, and I get these moments of like deep depression that I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is because I'm feeling this. Maybe I was triggered by, somebody scent, or maybe I was triggered by, somebody I saw that looked like someone else. And you recognize that, like, okay, this ain't normal because it's lasting longer than the last time you felt this way. There was one particular time I remember, I shared this a lot because it was the one big moment that I remember something is not right. I remember staying up and feeling like I had energy of Superman. I'm like, wow, I could do anything right now. And if you know me, people that know me in my life, I am such a clean freak. I wish I didn't have this about me, because then my family acts like they don't have to clean the bathrooms, and they don't have to like do all the things,
They
right?
know you can't take it. You're going
They
to give
just
in
know I
and do
can't
it.
handle it. Like I can't handle it. It's gonna get clean. I'm like,
Sounds
girls, you have
like
to clean
another
your
home I
bathroom.
know really well.
And so I stayed up for 4 days straight, and I cleaned everything in sight. And when I say that, I know it may trigger in your mind, oh, okay, you stayed up, so that means you fell asleep for a few hours. No, I never went to sleep. So that
Wow.
means everything in my house was spotless. I mean, I'm washing walls. I am cleaning everything in the house. I'm doing laundry, and I don't love the laundry. Like, that's like the one thing I don't want to fold it. I will
Yeah.
wash it because I like the smell of clean laundry, but I don't love folding it. And I cleaned everything for 4 days straight. And then we know what goes up must come down. And so after
Right.
those 4 days of me feeling so euphoric and like, man, I could just do anything, now I'm in depression and I can't get myself out of bed. And for a month, I felt like I could not get myself together. Mind you, at this time, my husband and I are youth pastors. And so Travis primarily could go to church and do what he needed to do, and he could save face for me. But while people are like, where is Brittany? My husband is trying his best
Yeah.
to make sure he covers me, and he does a
Mm-hmm.
great job in that. But there was a moment where I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Why can I? And I'm usually the get up, get it together. You can go, and you can muster up enough energy to smile when people ask you what's going on. But I couldn't get myself together. And that was the moment where I realized you're not good. You have to figure this out. And honestly, it's the Lord's goodness to me that I had my husband who would climb a mountain to make sure that I was good, and to like literally say, you need to get help. And I had a mentor in my life who treated me like I was her own daughter, who would drag me to therapy if I declined. And so I had people around me that would just make me get the help after they realized this was beyond what I can do on my own. That was the moment, I think, that, and there were several things that happened in that season where, things that I was saying out of my mouth that wasn't like me. Like I remember sitting in the car with my mentor and telling her that I thought that I wanted to kill myself. And she's thinking, I never heard you talk like that. So for anybody that's ever used those words, I believe you first. You could
Yeah.
be just saying it just because, okay, well, let's
Right.
get some help, because I can't chance that you're not
Right.
telling the truth, and I care about you, and you're not
Right.
alone. And so those kind of things are really the things that really made me believe you need to get help right now. I have kids, like I can't, I have to get help. And so that's when I knew this was beyond just like you feeling bad. This was, you need help. And so,
You mentioned that moment, Brittany, about cleaning the house and that huge high and that huge low. It doesn't necessarily mean that that was the moment, but you probably have had several moments
yeah,
that were catalytic in you realizing, nope, I am going to make a change. I'm going to
right.
create new disciplines. You mentioned going to counseling. Can you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit along the way? What were some of those catalytic moments like when you realized I'm going to make a change?
Yeah, I mean, I think really the changes and the big moments like that were I need to absolutely make change. I say this all the time for people. I do healthy things when I'm well, so that when I'm not well, I'm already in a rhythm of doing healthy things. And
Mm.
so honestly, it's those constant rhythms of doing those healthy things that have helped me get to the point of like when I don't feel I'm at my best, I'm already in those rhythms. And there were a ton of moments where I'm like, this is not good. You could have, the place where I thought I was going to kill myself is where it was the boom, you got to get help. But it wasn't I've gone to therapy. So the therapist already knew that we were probably headed in a bad direction. You know, I've been in a lot of spaces, and you're right, like where it wasn't just that one moment that said, you've got to get better. It was a history of moments that was like, you've got to make a change. You've got to do some things. And I think probably it wasn't, you know, I walked 10 miles one day. I got out of my bed and I walked 10 miles in my pajamas, where that wasn't something that I normally do. That was Brittany in my mood literally went from here to here.
Yeah.
Those are moments where you recognize this is not yourself. Bipolar is a roller coaster. And because I didn't know what I was dealing with at the time, those were those big moments of you got to do something about this. Those were the boom. Okay, we got to make a change. And you know, I've had to go to the hospital a couple times because of those big moments like that. And those were aggressive enough for me to recognize, here's the change. Here is the change moments. There were several like that, but I think for me, that big moment, probably more of this is where the difference maker was for me, was in 2019 when I had an eating disorder. When the eating disorder began, that changed my life, literally changed my life. I went away for a month and I got help. It literally changed the trajectory of my life because I had to leave our church. I had to leave my husband. I had to leave our children. And I went away from here. I didn't just go to counseling and come home. I didn't go to my psychiatrist and come home. I left my home for a month. I went to the hospital. I didn't get to see my family. I had to call them like everybody else, like a student. I had to call them on a phone that didn't belong to me. I had to live with people I didn't know that weren't Christians. We were all just in the same house. And that was the moment that I recognized, here we are. And this is going to change your life. You could either stop right here, or you can make the biggest shift that could change trajectory of your life. And it really did. I mean, I hadn't been the same since then. I didn't start speaking about mental health and mental illness until 2020. And that was after that big moment where I went to the hospital and everything shifted. Because I'd had those seasons of highs and lows. I'd had the moments where I've done all the things, right? And I've gone to counseling, I've done all the things. And those were moments that I needed to ride the roller coaster. But it wasn't until I went to the hospital that I recognized, man, we've been on this roller coaster for a really long time. And it shifted everything, because it's almost as if like I had to go to the place of my greatest pain. And that was 5-year-old Brittany just needed a really big dose of healing. And God is still working. And it wasn't just about bipolar, and it wasn't just about an eating disorder. It was Brittany that had been hurt as a little girl, still needed God to go to that place and bring healing there. I think that's where we miss it most sometimes, is because we're trying to heal surface things and heal maybe symptoms. And God wants to go to the depths of your greatest pain. And so while we deal with stress and we deal with anxiety and we deal with depression and we deal with loneliness, which, by the way, loneliness is at the top of the list of mental health crises in our world right now. And so as pastors and as leaders, we struggle with friendships. We don't want to really talk about that part because, you know, we're like, oh no, we got our golf buddies and we got our this buddies, but we don't really talk deep with these people. Let's be real.
No.
We don't really talk deep life stuff with them. We just hit balls and we just go play tennis and we go have lunch. But loneliness is at the top of the list. It doesn't exclude us as pastors. And I'll tell you, if you don't go to the place of your greatest pain, you'll be back in that circle. And I think for me, when I went to the hospital in 2019 with people I didn't know, with people that didn't have the same faith journey as me, I had to meet Jesus in the quiet I had to meet Jesus in a place that it was just about me and him, because I wasn't being taught nothing. It wasn't like it was being spoon fed to me. It wasn't like we were going to church. I had to go to church on my own. And that is where I met like Jesus and I. It's me and you, Jesus. And I'm hurting right now, and I'm away from my family and the people I love most, but I need healing. And that's what happened. And it changed me. And here I am talking to the world about things that I remember my family saying, what goes in this house stays in this house. And now the world hears what goes in the house.
Except for this.
Oh, well,
So,
it's courageous.
Yeah,
too.
it really is. And there's kind of two directions of this, of dealing with your greatest pain, right? Of
Yeah.
you're digging down to the root of it.
Yeah.
The spiritual identity cause.
Right.
And at the same time, you're putting into place daily healthy habits so that you can keep not just your sanity, but keep being a mom and keep being a wife.
Right.
And so there's really two things you're balancing. You can speak to either or both of those.
Yeah. It's really hard to keep a balance. I don't even know, because that would just be crazy.
Right, not that either one could get off balance, but you have two priorities, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there is. I mean, and it's honestly tough. If I were being real, like, it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
My children are always my children, my husband are a major priority to me. And so my household is a place of peace.
Mm-hmm.
I try to make sure that it is always a place of peace. When you walk into my house and you sit on my couch, I hope you feel like you can lay down and take a quick nap, because my home should feel like just a place of peace. I remember my mentor saying that I would always come to her house on her green couch, and I would just fall asleep and just like nestle in the corner of her couch, because her home always felt so peaceful. And you lived in a world that felt like chaos, and you go to someone's house and you could just rest on their sofa. That is such a gift. And it's a gift to the person that lives there, because you've created a safety for them. And so I've always just desired that my home would feel peaceful for my family, but also anybody that walks into my home. And so I don't know if I've really made it feel so balanced for that. But I will say this: there is a rhythm in my life that I don't miss. I try really, really hard not to miss. So what that looks like for me practically is, I have my dietitian that I meet with most times twice a week, but always once a week. My therapist I meet with once a week. And then my psychiatrist I meet with once a month. Those things are never off my list. I don't care what I'm doing and where I am in the world. I am either FaceTiming one of them, or we are on a Doxy website. But I am never missing those. It's a priority to me, especially because I am on other people's platforms, and I know how mental illness works. And I know how the enemy works. And the enemy's tactics with me, they don't change. Okay. Right. Like, I know that he is going to use my family, and he is going to try to use my mind against me, especially when I'm in front of other people. And so if I don't have my tools and my tool belt ready, then I have the propensity to be discouraged when I'm in front of people talking about Jesus and mental illness. And so when I get in front of people, the first thing I do when I'm away from that platform is I call my husband, I pray, and then I call my therapist, because I want to make sure that I'm healthy and I'm doing things well. And so I try to make sure I keep those rhythms in place. I always have a therapy session after I'm on anybody's platform, because I need process. I got to get it all out of my head. And then I try to journal, because I'm really good at convincing myself that what I just did was terrible. No matter how authentic it was, and no matter how vulnerable I was, I always can tell myself, oh man, that was just so bad. We all do that, right? We just do that. And so I try to really not think about it. I will just, I go back to, if I'm out of town, I go back to my hotel room and I grab a cup of noodles and watch Gilmore Girls, because it's literally brainless, and like you don't have to like
great
think
therapy.
You just watch it.
Now the rest of the podcast is going to turn into a Gilmore Girl discussion between.
There's like a whole other. Anyway, we won't go.
I know. So those, I mean, honestly, the rhythms that I have are just, it may not be everybody's way, but for me, I just want to stay healthy in my mind and my heart. And I really don't want to be a hypocrite when it comes. I don't want to be like on social media telling people do this, this, and this, and I'm not doing it myself. Right. And so I try to keep those rhythms in place. And then at home, my kids, they get to talk feelings. I don't try to tell them they can't feel what they feel. My oldest, she's getting older. I want her to be able to process how she processed. And then my home is a safe place to feel what you feel. We have fun together. We laugh together. We talk feelings together. We go to church together. We talk Jesus. We worship together. And those are the things that I think just make our home safe and our home peaceful. And I'm not sure I have it all perfected, and I probably won't ever have it all perfected, but I do try to keep those rhythms in place.
That's
You
great.
know, I think about that, Brittany, how powerful, how courageous it was for you to leave your church, leave your family, and you come back and create all these rhythms. I'm curious, as a pastor, there's a lot of pastors listening, we hope.
And Brittany's a pastor.
And as a pastor, Brittany, when you're pastoring, what are some things that you would say, hey, among ministers out there, this is a key problem? You mentioned loneliness.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is it that? Is it, what is the leading edge for pastors, and how do we discover that?
Honestly, I don't know everybody's problems. I won't pretend to know everyone's problems. I do think that sometimes fear plays a big role in that. Insecurity plays a big role in that. I can only speak for just what Travis and I have seen and experienced, and we've talked to a lot of different people. I try to be a vault for people. I get a lot of questions like this. And so I try to be very sensitive to people's struggles. I will say I see there's so much competition too in this role. We constantly watching what other people do, and we're constantly trying to, oh man, look, social media is such a great tool, and also could hurt us in a little bit because we're only seeing people's highlights, and then we're judging what we're doing based on what their highlights are. And my greatest encouragement, especially to pastors, I just love pastors, and my heart aches sometimes because I just know that the walk that we walk, and people don't understand what we walk through. And so we're pastoring churches, and then people that we love so deeply in our churches sometimes can say things that are hurtful, right? And so as we walk this, one of the greatest things I can encourage a pastor to do is pastors need pastors, and pastors need encouragement, and pastors need therapists. And no matter how much you don't want that in your life, you need secret keepers. You need people that can hold your words in their heart and not tell a soul.
That's
Unless
great.
you're planning to kill somebody. I don't know. But
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 are you
honestly,
saying
like,
you'd out me right now if you said,
I ain't
okay,
saying
all right,
nothing.
Well, that's the
'cause I
beauty of
don't
a
know
therapist, is they can't talk about what you talk about.
that's
But
right.
Right.
Go to your therapist,
but
dude.
yeah, but we need friends that do the same thing.
Yeah.
And we love
Yeah.
that about you
I
guys.
mean, it's honestly so hard because I just know from my perspective, we experience so much heaviness, and we love people so deeply. But you're only one person.
Yeah.
And you're only one person, and you're hearing so many stories and so much pain from people that you love so deeply. And you know what that does to your own mental health and your own stress levels when you can't dump that somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So I know,
Absolutely.
because I know you guys, that you are praying people, and you love deep, and you love everybody that you have intimate relationships with. And I know that you tell the Father, right? But imagine if you didn't have friendships, and you didn't have therapists, and you didn't have people that you could let all of that out to. There are pastors in the world that don't have that.
Right.
And so you imagine how much weight that is on someone's shoulders. That is what breaks my heart, because I know that there are pastors and leaders in this world that don't have access to what we have access to. And so those are the things that kind of like just makes me sad, because maybe they don't have the same access. And it's not for reasons that you may assume. It's not because, they don't have counselors in the area or whatever. Sometimes it's out of fear, and sometimes it's because they've been discouraged to not get a therapist, or they don't have the friendships nearby, whatever. But whatever the reason may be, I think my greatest encouragement is somebody needs to wrap their arms around local pastors, and there needs to be therapy at their fingertips. Somebody needs to be offering these things. It needs to be free. I don't know. I just have my own way. But one of the things I think for every pastor and leader needs to have free therapy. I mean, because it is hard having access, and access. I mean, one of the things that my heart's desire is to have free therapy for people that grew up in neighborhoods like me, because I know that when I was a teenager, when I was a kid, that was a joke.
Yeah.
But now I am the adult looking on the other side and saying, man, if I would have had therapy when I was a kid, I would have been leaps and bounds ahead. And so even looking at leadership and looking at pastors, like, man, I can only imagine the stories that people hear and the pain that they've endured and not having somebody to talk to. So that would be my,
That's
get you
awesome.
some people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
We've loved having that with you all, with you and Travis. And, you know, when we get together and we minister in the same city,
and we dump on you.
we minister,
No, tell me
but we get to
anything.
dump
I'm a
on
vault.
each other. We get to dump on each other. And I love that. But also because, hey, maybe there's some pastors, you're in a city right now. There's some other pastors like Brittany and Travis. There's a Brittany and Travis in every city.
Yeah.
And there's a Shane and Sue in every city, you know, where we get together, we have these dinners, we unload on each other. We know we're in it together.
Right.
It might be in other denominations, you know.
Right.
This is one way that we eliminate competition, right? When we actually care about the other ministers in the town and we are on the same team rather than fighting over the same people or and I think that keeps pastors, I think, from reaching out because they think, oh, well, the church down the street is my competition. Well, I think the world is big enough for more churches because we have a lot of lost people and a lot of people who don't go to church anymore. And if we would, I think, lose that aspect of fear and insecurity, we could actually find what we need in other pastors.
And I want to make sure everyone just heard you, Brittany, because I know we just took it to our friendship because we love our friendship with you. But I want to make sure everyone just heard you list out a whole team around you. And you said, I don't miss these. Like, this is you have a whole growth team.
Yeah.
Brittany Jones growth. And I want to make sure people hear that. How important is it to not just have friends? Friends are critical.
Yeah.
But you have a team around you, don't you?
I do. I have a team. You're right. Friends are critical, but friends can't be your therapist, and that's not fair to make them your therapist.
Yes.
My husband, I love him so much, and he is my best friend, but I would never want to put him in a position to be my policeman, especially if I'm struggling. I want him to be my spouse, which is why I have a therapist, which is why I have a psychiatrist to be my doctor. I have a dietitian to make sure that I'm staying on track with my nutrition. I have a mentor to call me out and make sure I'm covering my husband. And then my husband just gets to be my husband and my best friend. And then I have friendships that I can go out and we can drink coffee and go and shop because my husband doesn't want to go to Target. So, you know, you have a team around you so that the people in your life that plays the role they're supposed to play, they can just play that. You know, and there are moments where I don't do friendship so well, or I don't do this role so well, and then I got to redirect and make sure I'm being healthy in all of those aspects. But I will say, don't feed off someone else's therapy. Like, go get what you need for yourself. There's so many people that I know would love to ask a million questions so that they don't have to go and do therapy. And I also recognize that it's not as accessible to certain people for whatever reasons. If you can do your best to go and find a therapist, there are so many therapists in the world that they do sliding scales. You just got to do some research. I remember when I was going to therapy and I had to figure out, okay, how am I going to afford this? Because insurance pays like this amount. And I know the disparities with, I know all of the struggle. Trust me, I've been in this thing for 10 years already. And I had to pay out of pocket majority of that. I am paying out of pocket majority of that. I pay $100 a month, or not a month, a week for therapy. So I get it. That means I'm not going to Starbucks every single day for my coffee because I want to put that $5.60 towards my therapy. And I make coffee at home. If you ask my husband, I make Folgers coffee at home so that I can pay for my therapy because I don't want that to go against our regular budget, because I'm thinking, what's more important in my life? Is it the Starbucks that I was getting every single day? Or is it making sure that I'm the best that I can be for my mind? And that's just how I process, but that may not be how everybody else does. But I will say that if we can just try to figure out how to get you the best that you absolutely can be, you will never regret it. I am the best mom that I have ever been to my girls in the last 3 years because I decided to show up.
Right.
To show up.
Yep. Wow. That's so great. Coffee won't make you a better mom, but Therapy will.
And I thought, honestly, Folgers coffee does the trick. And it does make me better, but I'm just,
It does make you awake anyway, but
it does make you awake.
We're not
it's
saying it
for
doesn't
sure.
have a role, but
Yeah,
I love
all
how
right.
you played some cards. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for
Be-
this time.
yeah, before we go, how do listeners find you on social media?
Yes.
Can they find your writing and your
Yeah,
speaking?
you know what? On social media, Instagram, you can find me at Brittany Charisse. That is BrittanyCharise. That's on Instagram. And then you can check out my new website. It's www.brittanycjones.com. And that's where you'll get all of the updates from me. I have a couple things coming out this fall. So you want to kind of hang out there and see what's happening.
I love it. I love it. Well, we want to not only stay in touch with you and love our relationship with you, but we're so excited to introduce you to so many new people today, maybe. And hey, go follow Brittany. Let's go together on this journey. And Brittany, we end our podcast a little differently. We love to take time to pray. And I know it's a podcast, and I know people are listening at different times. Mm-hmm. So listen, hey, if you're driving down the road right now, if you listen to this on Apple Podcast or Spotify or YouTube, right now, just take a moment and pray for Brittany Jones. And so, hey, join us real quick in this prayer. Let it be representative of your prayer as well. So can we pray for you?
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. God, thank you for Brittany. Thank you for Travis. Thank you for Motivation Church. But Lord, I want to thank you most of all for the words of life that have been spoken today. And Lord, for Brittany, who gave her life to you so many times, but she gave her health to you. So God, you've made her whole, and you've brought healing to her, and you brought connection, and now, Lord, a voice to share. So God, I pray blessings on her ministry and over this critical message as people listen. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thanks
you
so much for joining us. That was fun.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can't wait till next time. Man.
That was good stuff.
I feel relieved already in my mental health. But more than that, Brittany Jones, thank you for just incredible time. You know, you may be processing some things in your own life. And when we have things going on, I love that she talked about this. You know, coming from abusive backgrounds or things that you have, when you have abuse happen to you, there's someone to blame. But when you have mental illness,
which can be caused from abuse,
right? Which can be.
It still can be someone else's
then
fault.
who do I blame? And I love the way she processes and talks through this. And the other thing I got was just about how rhythms are so critical,
right?
While you're healthy,
right?
So if you create healthy rhythms when you're healthy, then you have them in place
when you have a crisis.
Yeah, and I thought about the idea of training, like people do, like in the military, other things. They train for crisis, they train for things. They have things on muscle memory, on automatic. They go to it. And the reason they train over and over and over and over and over again is because when the actual crisis happens, they go to that instantaneous, natural response. And in order for it to become natural, it has to be repeated. And I just loved her take on that. It was really, really good.
Yeah, I think that's key for spiritual leaders, because I feel like in the church world, we train people for God's blessing and for success. And there's not a lot of training for hardship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hardship is framed in like the devil's going to cause problems, which he is, but we don't expect it often to come from the places that it comes from.
Or just because God can overcome anything, we think, oh, well then I'm
right. He'll take care of it. Right. All right. So, kind of piggybacking on that, I loved her quote: "If you don't go to the place of your deepest pain, you will keep circling back there." That is absolutely 100% true. My insecurities or my grief or my places of pain inform the decisions that I make and the perspective that I have. And then when a crisis hits, trauma is always attached to other traumas. So I go and I relive all the things that I haven't dealt with fully.
Yeah.
And it's, we have to go to the places of our deepest pain, which means we need vulnerability, and that's what we're scared of. She mentioned specifically pastors having issues of fear, insecurity, and competition. I mean, that all comes from pain or from fear of pain. So
Right. Well, and just having people to process. She said, like
Yeah.
some secret keepers. I love it.
right,
You know,
you need
just
a couple people, not everybody.
Yeah.
Not everybody needs to know everything.
Such great wisdom. And listen, when are we going to talk about this?
Right.
There is mental illness, and I think as pastors we all say, we know there's a mental illness epidemic. There's a crisis because we know so many people.
Right. That's who we're processing and helping. But
Are we open enough
you're right.
to actually recognize this going on in our own lives and our own families?
And our staff and
Are we
yeah.
transparent enough to live this out? Or are we bold enough to even just talk to a counselor, talk to someone about it? So I hope Brittany inspired you today as much as she did us, because what a powerful message that she's been taking really around the world. And continue to go follow her and support her. But as always, we love having you with us on the journey here at Stress Test. Each and every episode is another opportunity for us to be able to talk about how we manage our stress differently and find rest for our souls. So thanks for joining us. See you next time on Stress Test.